This is Wei Kaiyan, the richest billionaire in China in 2017, a bold and audacious entrepreneur.
Who ultimately thought that he could do anything as long as he borrowed enough money.
This daring spirit brought him a colossal real estate empire, along with an even more colossal debt. In December 2021, Evergrande collapsed, becoming the world's most indebted conglomerate. However, this is not merely the problem of Wei Kaiyan or his empire alone.
This story goes to the heart of China's position as the prime locomotive of global economic growth.
At its core, the real estate sector has exerted a profound influence over China's economy for decades, contributing an astonishing 30% or more to the nation's gross domestic product. By comparison, in developed economies like the United Kingdom or the United States, the real estate sector typically accounts for less than 20% of GDP. The root of this extraordinary dominance lies in one of the most significant events in human history: an unparalleled migration of people from rural to urban areas in China. Hundreds of millions of young individuals, the children of farmers, left behind the fields where they toiled for meager earnings, living lives that were scarcely different from those of their ancestors 1,000 years ago. With just 4 to 5 hours of travel, they arrived in bustling cities teeming with massive factories and opportunities that promised a transformative, better life. This seemingly limitless labor force transformed China into the world's manufacturing powerhouse, earning it the moniker, the factory of the world. In the 1990s, when Evergrande was founded, roughly 1/3 of China's population resided in urban areas. This figure surged dramatically, growing from 415 million in 1998 to over 900 million by 2021. Today, China's urban population is twice that of its rural population. This massive wave of migration created an acute and complex housing crisis. Before 1998, the Chinese government provided every urban citizen with a free apartment as part of its welfare system. However, these apartments were not fully owned by their occupants. Residents could only claim full ownership by purchasing the properties at a subsidized price from the state. This policy shift opened the door for banks to play a pivotal role. They introduced a wide array of mortgage packages and development incentives, but these were not primarily aimed at individual workers. Instead, the focus was on real estate development companies. Indeed, everyone wanted a home, and someone had to build those homes. Or, to put it another way, a significant portion of the workforce was tasked with constructing homes, not only for themselves, but also for the millions of others flooding into cities. This segment of workers accounted for 12.6% of China's total labor force at the time. The combination of skyrocketing demand, an abundant labor supply, and generous financial incentives created the perfect conditions for the largest real estate boom in recorded history. Evergrande was established in 1996 by Wei Kaiyan, a man whose vision aligned perfectly with the opportunities of the era. Buildings sprang up like mushrooms after rain, rising rapidly to accommodate the housing needs of the enormous influx of migrants pouring into urban centers. Today, China boasts over 400 million middle-class citizens, a demographic powerhouse that has been the primary engine behind the country's miraculous economic growth over the past 2 decades. Wei Kaiyan seized this opportunity from the outset.
我和恒大的一切都是党给的，国家给的，社会给的。
Evergrande's scope extended far beyond merely building homes. The conglomerate embarked on a wide range of ambitious projects, including hotels, luxury resorts, schools, hospitals, sports stadiums, and even amusement parks. From 2005 to 2020, Evergrande's total revenue grew at an astonishing average rate of 44% per year, making it the fastest-growing enterprise in China's history. Wei Kaiyan became a living embodiment of the immense wealth that could be amassed through Chinese real estate. Starting with modest, shoebox-size apartments designed for migrant workers transitioning to urban life, Evergrande achieved success that defied imagination. Wei's personal fortune reached $42.5 billion, a figure that commanded respect, especially given his humble beginnings. Those who met or worked with him universally praised his exceptional ability to persuade others, describing him as a phenomenal salesperson. Equally important was his mastery of relationship building. The more connections one has, the greater the access to loans, investments, and capital. For instance, his close relationship with Joseph Lau, a notorious real estate tycoon from Hong Kong, secured $400 million in investments for Evergrande in early 2021. In the realm of Chinese politics, Wei also held a significant presence. In 2015, when President Xi Jinping made a state visit to the United Kingdom, Wei Kaiyan was included as a member of the diplomatic delegation. Clearly, one does not secure a place in such high-profile delegations without a substantial political stature. With the immense wealth and status he amassed, it's unsurprising that Evergrande's chairman embraced an extravagant lifestyle. He owned a luxurious villa in the Peak, the most expensive neighborhood in Hong Kong, a yacht valued at $60 million, a private Airbus A319, and numerous other assets that remain unverified. His conglomerate rose from nothing to become one of China's largest real estate empires, boasting over 1,000 projects across cities large and small throughout the mainland. The company's balance sheet recorded assets worth over 2 trillion yuan, a figure so vast it was almost incomprehensible. But every triumph comes with a price. For Evergrande, that price was a business model fraught with risk. Picture this. You have $100 in your pocket. It's a respectable sum, but far too little to launch a business of significant scale. To expand your ambitions, you borrow an additional $400 from friends, family, banks, or any willing lender. You take the entire $500 and invest it, earning a $50 profit. This profit represents a 10% return on the total investment, but a 50% return on your initial capital. If you hadn't borrowed and only invested your $100, you'd have earned just $10 in profit, a mere 10% return on your initial capital. Borrowing multiplied your potential profit by 5. This concept is known as financial leverage. Evergrande mastered the art of financial leverage, borrowing amounts that were hundreds or even thousands of times greater than their equity capital. This massive influx of borrowed funds fueled the conglomerate's meteoric rise in an extraordinarily short period. But how did they secure such enormous loans? The answer lies in their business model. The first step was to use their own capital to acquire large plots of land in strategic locations across China, particularly in rapidly developing Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. To outmaneuver competitors, Evergrande purchased land at premium prices, ensuring they secured the largest possible inventory. These land assets were then used as collateral to obtain loans from banks. The borrowed funds were channeled into developing projects on those same plots. Let's call the first one Project A. This is where the complexity begins to unfold. During this period, driven by the massive migration wave described earlier, housing prices in China rose relentlessly year after year. The government actively prioritized real estate as a cornerstone of the national economy. The combination of immense demand and government support led the public to believe that housing prices would only climb, never decline. Project A, often still under construction or even yet to break ground, was effortlessly sold out by Evergrande through a system known as pre-selling. You might assume they used the proceeds from these sales to pay off their debts. Think again. This was the moment to harness financial leverage to expand their operations even further. The impressive sales figures convinced banks to extend even more loans to Evergrande. Beyond bank loans, Evergrande tapped into additional sources of capital through various means. One prominent method was issuing bonds. In financial hubs like Hong Kong and Singapore, Evergrande's bonds offered exceptionally high interest rates, ranging from 8% to 13% annually. The massive scale of their projects and impressive sales figures made everyone believe they could never go bankrupt. The additional borrowed capital, along with pre-sale funds, was used to buy more land and undertake Project B. The process repeated with Projects C, D, E, and so on. At every step, Evergrande performed impressively. According to their 2018 annual report, Evergrande owned a land bank of over 303 million square meters, valued at nearly $76 billion, the largest in China at the time. Among them, the standout was the Ocean Flower Island project in Hainan, dubbed the Dubai of China, spanning 8 square kilometers with a total announced investment of $24 billion. In 2018, pre-sale revenue reached nearly $80 billion. This figure rose to $97 billion in 2019, making Evergrande the real estate developer with the highest pre-sale revenue in China. However, the aggressive construction and pre-selling of projects caused their debt to swell dramatically. Land was no longer as easy to acquire as before, and projects weren't always completed on schedule. And so, they began venturing into fields completely unrelated to real estate. Evergrande invested in electric vehicles, aiming to produce 1 million cars annually. $47 billion was poured in, 9 models were launched, and they boldly claimed they would surpass Tesla. They acquired the Guangzhou Football Club and renamed it Guangzhou Evergrande. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars recruiting European stars. Then there was Evergrande Fairyland, an amusement park aimed at rivaling Disneyland, and Evergrande Health, operating in the healthcare sector. However, all these new investment ventures failed to meet expectations. The electric vehicles didn't sell. The football club incurred losses despite winning titles. The amusement park lagged behind schedule, and the healthcare venture lacked expertise. More importantly, as funds were diverted to these ambitions, the real estate projects, the core strength of the conglomerate, came to a near-complete standstill. But the decisive blow that toppled Evergrande didn't come from these projects. It came from a larger macroeconomic factor. For over 20 years, China witnessed an unprecedented period of economic growth thanks to real estate. But the times had changed. The urban population growth rate fell from 4.1% in 1996 to just 2.1% in 2020. Meanwhile, real estate projects continued to sprout. Supply outstripped demand, causing the vacancy rate of apartments to rise to alarming levels. According to 2020 government data from China, approximately 22% of urban housing was unoccupied. In some cities, the number of apartments was enough to house around 90 million people, larger than the populations of European countries like the United Kingdom or Germany. Even with so many vacant apartments, their prices remained far from affordable. The ability to afford a home in urban China is among the most unattainable in the world. It takes over 50 years of an average household's income to buy a mid-tier apartment. For comparison, the equivalent figure is approximately 15 years in London and 10 years in New York. Understandably, the Chinese government could no longer allow this unsustainable situation to persist. The nation needed to curtail real estate projects fueled by debts that investors and developers could not realistically repay. If a behemoth like Evergrande were to default on its obligations, the banks that had extended massive loans would face a severe crisis, triggering a domino effect that could ripple across other sectors of the economy. To prevent this, the 3 red lines policy was introduced. Under this policy, there were 3 mandatory conditions for real estate companies seeking additional loans. Red line 1, the debt-to-asset ratio, excluding pre-sale revenue, must not exceed 70%. For example, imagine your company has $100 in assets, including land, cash, and property. But $70 of that is debt. That means you only truly own $30. The debt-to-asset ratio is 70 out of 100, 70%, just meeting the first condition. Red line 2, the net debt-to-equity ratio must not exceed 100%. This is calculated using the formula you're seeing on the screen. Using the same example, your company has $50 in equity and borrows $100 in cash from a bank. This $100 is called total debt. You keep $20 and invest the remaining $80. The $20 you keep can be used to repay debt immediately, so it's called cash and cash equivalents. The $80 you invested is called net debt. The formula is: so, $100 minus $20 divided by $50 equals 80 divided by 50 equals 160%. Your company would not be allowed to borrow more. Red line 3, the final one, is simpler. The cash to short-term debt ratio must be less than 100%. Note that cash here refers to highly liquid assets, including cash equivalents that can be converted to cash in the short term. These could include bank deposits, certificates of deposit maturing within 3 months, treasury bonds, or short-term corporate notes. If a company violates any of these three conditions, it cannot borrow additional capital. In Evergrande's case, they violated all three red lines. According to Financial Times data in 2021, Evergrande's debt-to-asset ratio was 80%, net debt to equity was 150%, and cash to short-term debt also exceeded 100%. Their previous business model was broken. Evergrande was unable to borrow more capital, and so they fell into a collapse spiral, which can be illustrated as follows. Unable to borrow more leads to no funds to complete unfinished projects, leads to unable to deliver pre-sold homes to customers, leads to customers lose trust, leads to no more pre-sales, which leads to cash flow collapses. A real-world example is the Evergrande Venice project in Xiamen. They pre-sold 1,000 apartments when the site was still being leveled. After the three red lines, unable to borrow more, construction halted. Customers protested, banks stopped dispersing funds, and the entire capital chain broke. Facing nearly $20 billion in maturing international bonds and tens of billions in domestic bank loans, Evergrande couldn't adapt in time. The three red lines policy was designed to force companies to gradually reduce debt and develop sustainably. The three red lines didn't kill Evergrande, they merely exposed the truth. The conglomerate had long been unable to stand on its own without the next loan. But this is not just the collapse of a real estate empire. China chose to let Evergrande fall rather than save it. And the most pressing question for the Chinese government now is, how many more Evergrandes are waiting to collapse?